Today's case takes us to Fukuoka Prefecture, Japan. In the northern part of Fukuoka Prefecture lies the city of Kitakyushu, considered one of Japan's most important industrial and port cities. The protagonist of this story is Matsunaga Futoshi, born on April 28, 1961. Futoshi's family operated a tatami mat business, which allowed him to grow up in a wealthy household, spoiled by his mother. Whatever he wanted, his mother would buy for him. His life could be described with the phrase, "everything handed to you on a silver platter." From a young age, Futoshi displayed erratic behavior and often acted self-centered. In 1978, at the age of 17, he was involved in numerous high school romances. On one occasion, he lured a girl to his home and deliberately assaulted her. Within days, the incident spread throughout the school, but Futoshi seemed unfazed. His parents quickly transferred him to another high school where he continued his reckless behavior. After graduating high school in 1980, 19-year-old Futoshi got married. A year later, he had a son. At this time, Futoshi inherited the family tatami mat business and became the president. However, from the start, his leadership brought trouble. To cut costs, he replaced the high-quality materials traditionally used in production with cheap, inferior alternatives. He also hired mediocre sales staff and imposed outrageously high sales quotas. Employees who failed to meet these targets faced physical punishment, including being punched, kicked, and even shocked with electricity. To avoid such harsh treatment, company employees began engaging in widespread fraud, doing whatever it took to sell the low-quality tatami mats. They didn't hesitate to deceive their own friends and family. Under these circumstances, Futoshi managed to amass significant wealth. In 1981, 20-year-old Futoshi stumbled upon an old high school yearbook on a bookshelf. While flipping through it, he came across a photo of a girl who caught his eye. Her name was Junko Ogata, a 19-year-old kindergarten teacher. Junko came from an esteemed family. Her father, Yu Ogata, was the vice chairman of the local agricultural association, and her mother, Shizumi Ogata, was a homemaker. Junko also had a younger sister, Rieko Ogata, who worked as a dentist. The Ogata family was well known in the area. Futoshi had pursued Junko in high school, but had been rejected. The two had not been in contact since. Seeing Junko's old photo reignited memories of his youth. Despite being married, Futoshi couldn't suppress his inappropriate thoughts. He decided to call Junko, proposing a casual outing. To his surprise, she agreed. Initially, Junko didn't think much of Futoshi, but that fateful phone call sparked a connection. At the time, Futoshi was a well-known local businessman. His polite demeanor and charming conversation quickly won Junko over. The two began spending more time together, and one night, Futoshi drove Junko home. However, instead of taking her directly to her house, he drove to a secluded hotel. Using sweet words, he persuaded Junko to go into the hotel room with him, where they became intimate. Afterward, Futoshi acted remorseful and begged for Junko's forgiveness. Seeing his seemingly sincere demeanor, Junko softened and forgave him. From then on, they secretly maintained their affair for 3 years. In August 1984, their relationship was discovered by Junko's family. Her father, Yu Ogata, hired a private investigator and learned that Futoshi was already married. Enraged, he demanded that his daughter end her relationship with the man. Unbeknownst to the Ogata family, Futoshi had already devised a plan to handle the situation. He was aware that the Ogata family, being prominent in the community, had no sons and only 2 daughters. Futoshi, skilled at reading others, understood that the Ogatas were deeply concerned about their daughters marrying respectably. He approached Junko's father and said, "I will divorce my wife soon and officially marry Junko." With his persuasive and charming words, he convinced Junko's family to approve of their relationship. As time passed, one day Junko accidentally mentioned her ex-boyfriend during a conversation with Futoshi. This enraged him. He demanded to see her diary and ordered her to explain every entry in detail. Whenever a man's name appeared in the diary, Futoshi would beat and berate her. He even went as far as burning his name into her skin with a cigarette and tattooing his name on her right leg. To gain his forgiveness, Junko was forced to call her ex-boyfriend, insult him with vulgar language, and declare that they would never speak again. Sometime later, Junko's mother, Shizumi, discovered that her daughter had been physically assaulted by Futoshi and was deeply shocked. She confronted Futoshi and demanded he end the relationship with Junko immediately. Futoshi claimed that he had divorced his wife. In reality, his wife had long recognized his true nature and was the one who initiated the divorce. For some reason, Shizumi believed Futoshi's claim. The two agreed to have a private conversation in a discreet location. However, Futoshi took Junko's mother to a remote hotel and assaulted her. After experiencing such a humiliating ordeal, Shizumi was too ashamed to tell her family. Fearing the scandal would come to light, she chose to turn a blind eye to Junko's relationship with Futoshi. However, Futoshi did not stop. He told Junko that her mother had been seducing him and that they were involved in an unwanted romantic relationship. His intention in sharing this was to create a rift between Junko and her family. By February 1985, Junko endured relentless abuse from Futoshi daily for a year. Unable to bear it any longer, she decided to end her life. Fortunately, her parents discovered her in time and rushed her to the hospital. Junko's family, being prominent in the community, placed a high value on reputation. Her father, in particular, could not tolerate the shame and humiliation such a scandal would bring if it became public knowledge. Luckily, Junko received timely treatment at the hospital and recovered. After her discharge, Futoshi took her home, only to find another excuse to beat her. He threatened her, saying that if she died, the cause of her death would be investigated and her family would be summoned by the police. Adding to his cruelty, Futoshi took explicit photos of Junko and warned her that if a similar incident happened again, he would make the photos public. Futoshi then coerced Junko into writing a letter severing ties with her family. The letter read, "I do not want my future husband to become a victim of the Ogata family. If you do not agree to cut off contact, I will leave." Junko eventually quit her job as a kindergarten teacher, as Futoshi demanded, and joined his company, where she began working as an accountant. 7 years later, in 1992, Futoshi officially divorced his ex-wife in France. That same year, the tatami mat company he managed faced accusations of selling substandard products. Enraged, Futoshi vented his frustration on his employees, subjecting them to physical punishment. This behavior caused the company's performance to decline, and it eventually accrued debts totaling 90 million yen, approximately $580,000. At this time, Futoshi was also under investigation by the police for suspected fraud and coercion. Upon learning of the charges, Futoshi fled with Junko from the city of Kurume to Kitakyushu overnight, beginning their life on the run. During this period, Junko gave birth to a child. Cut off from financial resources, Futoshi devised a plan to make money. He targeted a woman he had known previously, referred to here as Ms. A, who was now married with her own family. Futoshi deceived Ms. A by claiming that Junko was his younger sister and that he was caring for her as a single mother. Under Futoshi's sweet-talking manipulation, Ms. A left her husband and brought her child to live with him. Futoshi rented 2 apartments in the Kokurakita ward of Kitakyushu, located in a 5-story building. One apartment was used for childcare, while the other served as a detention site for others. During this time, Futoshi drained Ms. A's life savings and forced her to extort large sums of money from her ex-husband and her family through various means. In total, Futoshi managed to extract approximately 11.8 million yen from Ms. A. One day, Ms. A's second daughter fell to the ground. Upon seeing her, Futoshi claimed that the child had accidentally fallen from a chair. The two took the girl to the hospital, but tragically, she passed away despite efforts to save her. Over time, as Ms. A stopped receiving financial support from her family, Futoshi began to attack and berate her. On March 31, 1994, Unable to endure the abusive and prison-like life any longer, Ms. A took her eldest son to a hotel, asked the staff to care for him, and then went to the sea and jumped in. She was later found drowned. With no evidence to suggest foul play, the police did not investigate further and deemed it an ordinary incident. This allowed Futoshi to escape accountability for his role in her death. Following Ms. A's death, Futoshi met a man named Kumio Taraya, who worked for a real estate company and had a young daughter, Akiko Taraya. Kumio was living with his girlfriend at the time. After meeting, Futoshi and Kumio often drank together at an izakaya bar, eventually becoming close friends. One day, Futoshi told Kumio, "I can predict horse racing and lottery results, and together we can develop prediction software to earn significant profits." Trusting his friend, Kumio handed over his entire family's savings to Futoshi without hesitation or consulting his girlfriend. This led to his girlfriend breaking up with him. Kumio then moved to a new place with his daughter. Seeing this, Futoshi feigned concern and invited Kumio and his daughter to live with him. Although Kumio declined Futoshi's offer, he entrusted his daughter Akiko to Futoshi's care while he stayed at his company dormitory. Over time, Kumio frequently visited Futoshi's home to check on his daughter and drink with him. One evening at the izakaya, Futoshi intentionally got Kumio drunk and began probing him about whether he had embezzled money from his company. In his intoxicated state, Kumio confessed to various shameful acts he had committed at work. Futoshi, ever the manipulator, secretly recorded the entire conversation. When Kumio sobered up, he realized something was wrong. Futoshi used the recordings to blackmail him, extorting money from him bit by bit. Eventually, Kumio was fired from his job. With no other options, he moved into Futoshi's home. Once there, Futoshi confined Kumio to the bathroom of the apartment, ordering Junko to keep watch over him. He forced Kumio to call friends and family to beg for money, threatening him with a stun baton if he refused. Even during the freezing winter, Kumio was only allowed to wear a thin jacket, eat one instant noodle packet per day, and finish it within a specific time limit, or else face electric shocks. The abuse escalated further. Futoshi coerced Kumio's daughter, Akiko, to bite and beat her own father. Under the relentless physical and psychological abuse, Kumio began vomiting and experiencing severe diarrhea, causing a foul odor to permeate the apartment. Enraged by the smell, Futoshi forced Kumio to eat his own feces. Living under such inhumane conditions, it became impossible for Kumio to survive. On March 26, 1996, 4 years after Futoshi fled to Kitakyushu and several months into Kumio's imprisonment, he succumbed to mental and physical exhaustion, dying of heart failure in the bathroom. After discovering that Kumio had died, Futoshi demanded Kumio's daughter, Akiko, commit an unthinkable act, bite her own father's body. Akiko, only 10 years old, was terrified of Futoshi, knowing that disobedience would result in being shocked with electricity. Out of fear, she complied with his orders. Futoshi went further, taking photos of Akiko biting her father and then telling her, "Your father died because of you, and now his body bears your bite marks. If the police investigate, you'll be the suspect." Horrified, Akiko had no choice but to obey him. Afterward, Akiko and Junko dismembered Kumio's body and disposed of the remains in the sea. During this process, Junko realized that she was about to go into labor and temporarily stopped to be admitted to the hospital. Following Kumio's death, Futoshi's financial resources were once again cut off. He soon targeted another victim, the ex-wife of one of Kumio's friends, referred to as Ms. B. At 36 years old, Ms. B had 3 children. She was divorced, with custody of her eldest son given to her ex-husband, her second daughter living with her parents, and her 3-year-old daughter living with her. Ms. B and her youngest daughter moved in with Futoshi. On December 30th, 1996, shortly after moving in, Futoshi confined Ms. B and her 3-year-old daughter to the second floor of the apartment. He assaulted them daily, using physical violence and electric shocks. Futoshi also forced Ms. B to harm her own daughter, pushing her into a severe state of mental breakdown. One morning, Ms. B noticed that the window on the second floor was left open. Seizing the opportunity, she jumped out and successfully escaped. On March 16, 1997, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, a chronic psychological condition caused by extreme trauma. After Ms. B escaped, Futoshi decided her young daughter was no longer of any value to him. He abandoned the child on the doorstep of Ms. B's ex-husband and left. Once again deprived of financial support, Futoshi turned to Junko and said, "I've always been the one earning money. Now it's your turn." Left with no choice, Junko entrusted her 2 children to Akiko's care and began working as a bartender. During this period, Junko considered escaping, believing that Futoshi did not know the specific address of her workplace. After her shift, she chose not to return home. Futoshi, enraged by her absence, quickly suspected Junko's mother, with whom he maintained a secretive and twisted relationship. Through her mother, Futoshi discovered Junko's workplace but decided not to confront her there. Instead, Futoshi traveled from Kitakyushu to Junko's family home in Kurume. He told the Ogata family, "Junko has been with me and has committed several murders." He added, "I'm not involved, but I won't call the police." To back up his claims, he showed them photos of Junko dismembering and disposing of bodies. Junko's father, who placed great importance on family honor, was horrified. He believed that if the truth came out, their family would face immense shame and humiliation. In an effort to silence Futoshi, Junko's parents agreed to help him deceive her. Junko's mother called her and said, "Futoshi has died. You can come home without worry." Junko, torn between doubt and hope, chose to believe her mother. However, the moment she returned home, Futoshi appeared before her. Only then did she realize she had been betrayed by her mother, but it was already too late. Futoshi began threatening Junko's family, stating that if they wanted to cover up Junko's crimes, they had to comply with his demands. He pressured them to pay an enormous sum of money to protect the family's reputation. Junko's father mortgaged the family land for 63 million yen, but even that was not enough to satisfy Futoshi. In addition to Junko, the Ogata family had another daughter, Rieko. After Junko left home, Rieko got married. Her husband, Shuya Ogata, was a former local police officer who later worked for the Agricultural Bureau. The couple had 2 children, a daughter named Aya Ogata and a son named Yuki Ogata. In April 1997, Shuya noticed that his wife and in-laws often went out late at night, which raised his suspicions. When he confronted Rieko, she finally revealed that her sister Junko had committed a serious crime. Shuya, being cautious by nature, was alarmed. Around this time, Futoshi learned about Shuya and discovered that he was a former police officer. This made Futoshi anxious, fearing Shuya might report him to the authorities. To counter this, Futoshi proactively approached Shuya and invited him for drinks. During their conversation, Futoshi manipulated Shuya by planting seeds of doubt, saying, "While you didn't marry into the Ogata family for their land and money, the truth is you're not inheriting anything. They've deceived you. The Ogata family is simply using you as a tool. Even your wife's character is questionable, and it all stems from her mother's influence." Futoshi fabricated more lies, claiming, "I had a relationship with Rieko when she was 14, not knowing who she was at the time. She even had a miscarriage shortly before marrying you, and after the marriage, she has been involved in multiple secret affairs with other men." Seeing Shuya's growing anger, Futoshi escalated his manipulation, revealing that the Ogata family's land had been mortgaged and that they were penniless. He showed Shuya forged documents to back up his claims. Believing Futoshi's lies, Shuya became completely convinced. That evening, Shuya drank heavily, and driven by rage, went home and violently attacked his in-laws and wife. This marked the beginning of a fractured relationship among the 4 family members. In the following weeks, Futoshi continued to sow discord within the Ogata family, deepening their mistrust of one another. Exploiting the chaos, he coerced them into giving him more money. The family, now financially devastated, resorted to borrowing money from relatives and friends. They even considered selling land owned by Junko's grandfather, but the elderly man refused to comply. As strange incidents continued to plague the Ogata family, their friends and relatives grew suspicious, fearing something serious was happening. Concerned, they reported the situation to the police. When the authorities visited the Ogata household, they inquired about Futoshi, who was already wanted for fraud and other crimes. However, the Ogata family, valuing their reputation above all else, concealed the truth and continued to protect him. After the police left, Futoshi manipulated the entire Ogata family into relocating to Kitakyushu, claiming it was necessary to avoid further scandal. After arriving in Kitakyushu, Futoshi immediately detained the Ogata family and imposed strict rules. They were allowed only 1 meal per day, could not speak without his permission, and had to submit written requests to use the restroom. Any violation of these rules resulted in electric shocks. At this point, the Ogata family no longer trusted one another, often harboring suspicion toward each other. To gain Futoshi's favor, they were even willing to harm their own family members. On December 21st, 1997, Futoshi, then 36 years old, ordered Junko to administer repeated electric shocks to her 61-year-old father, ultimately causing his painful death. After Junko's father died, Futoshi gathered the family to discuss how to dispose of the body, even involving Rieko's 4-year-old son in the process. They decided to dismember the body and dispose of it in the sea. Witnessing her husband's gruesome death, Junko's mother began to suffer from severe mental health issues, frequently making loud, strange noises. By January 20th, 1998, Futoshi decided that Junko's mother's screaming posed a risk of being overheard by neighbors. He ordered Junko and Rieko to drag their mother into the bathroom and strangle her to death with a cord. Afterward, they disposed of her body in the same way, throwing it into the sea. To prevent anyone from escaping, Futoshi forced the family to live in 2 separate apartments. During this time, Rieko was repeatedly assaulted and raped by Futoshi, eventually becoming pregnant. The prolonged electric shock she endured caused her to lose her hearing, and she began to suffer from severe mental health issues. On February 10th, 1998, just 20 days after Junko's mother was killed, Futoshi ordered the same method to be used on Rieko, now pregnant, to avoid further complications. He commanded Junko, Shuya, Rieko's husband, and Rieko's 10-year-old daughter Aya to drag Rieko into the bathroom. Aya was forced to hold her mother's legs while the others strangled her to death with a cord. Following Rieko's murder, Shuya began to suffer from extreme mental and physical breakdowns, vomiting and experiencing severe diarrhea that caused the apartment to reek. Furious, Futoshi punished Shuya by forcing him to eat his own feces. This punishment further exacerbated Shuya's deteriorating mental state. By April 13th, 1998, 2 months after Rieko's death, Shuya succumbed to exhaustion and heart failure in the bathroom. At this point, only Junko and Rieko's 2 children, Aya and 5-year-old Yuki, remained in the Ogata family. Futoshi decided that keeping the 2 children alive served no purpose. On May 17, 1998, he ordered Aya to kill her younger brother Yuki in the kitchen. After carrying out the horrific act, Aya was overwhelmed with guilt and mental anguish, losing control of her mind. Futoshi then subjected Aya to brutal electric shocks to her face. 1 month later, on June 7, 1998, Aya was electrocuted to death by Junko and Akiko, the daughter of Kumio, under Futoshi's orders. After Aya's death, Futoshi told Junko, "If you hadn't tried to escape, none of this would have happened." Over the span of 6 months, 6 members of the Ogata family, all related by blood, died one after another in the same room. Throughout the ordeal, Futoshi rarely took direct action himself, but instead manipulated others into doing his bidding. Most of the bodies were dismembered and disposed of at sea. A once happy and peaceful family was unjustly wiped off the face of the earth. Many have wondered how the family succumbed to the control of such a monstrous figure. This has led to comparisons with Stockholm Syndrome, a psychological condition also referred to as hostage syndrome. It describes a complex phenomenon where victims develop feelings of affection, trust, and even loyalty toward their captors. Such emotions cause victims to empathize with their abusers, trust them, and in some cases even assist in their crimes. Hostages become psychologically dependent on their captors, believing their survival is entirely at the mercy of their abuser and feeling gratitude for being allowed to live. Stockholm Syndrome is not limited to kidnapping victims, but can also occur in anyone with a close and intense relationship with their abuser. Over time, the hostages unconsciously equate their captor's safety with their own. The Ogata family became a textbook example of this syndrome. Sometime later, Futoshi befriended another woman, referred to here as Ms. C. Ms. C had 2 daughters, and she eventually moved in with Futoshi along with her children. Futoshi swindled 25 million yen from her before she disappeared under mysterious circumstances. To this day, no one knows what happened to her. Her 2 daughters remained with Futoshi until the case came to light. In the early hours of March 6, 2002, Kumio's daughter, Akiko, could no longer endure Futoshi's brutal torture. She escaped the apartment while Futoshi and Junko were asleep. Successfully fleeing, she sought help from her grandparents and contacted the police. Initially, the police suspected Akiko was mentally unstable and doubted her story. However, as a matter of procedure, they investigated. When they arrived at the apartment Akiko had fled, it was empty. Futoshi and Junko, realizing Akiko had escaped, fled as well. Shortly afterward, a man identifying himself as Miyazaki called Akiko's grandparents, demanding 5 million yen as compensation for raising Akiko over the years. The police, who were monitoring the situation, used this to track down Futoshi and Junko. The next day, they arrested the pair when they arrived to collect the money. It was only then that the police realized Akiko's claims were true. During interrogation, both Futoshi and Junko initially refused to cooperate. Eventually, they revealed that 4 children were still alive in a neighboring apartment, 2 of whom were their own. After their arrest, both suspects remained silent for a long time. About 6 months later, Junko, after receiving psychological counseling from the police, finally broke free of Futoshi's control. She stated, "I want to confess everything, and am prepared to accept the death penalty." On the other hand, Futoshi continued to maintain his silence. When confronted with Junko's confession, Futoshi claimed, "The tragedy was caused by the Ogata family themselves. They harbored hatred for one another and inflicted harm upon each other. It had nothing to do with me, and I never gave any orders." He adamantly denied all responsibility for the crimes. The case was soon reported across various media outlets, shocking all of Japan. Futoshi's actions were utterly inhumane, prompting many to question how such a monstrous, cold-hearted individual could exist. The case became one of the most closely followed incidents in Japan at the time. By June 2002, the trial commenced at Fukuoka Prefectural Court. During the trial, Junko pleaded guilty and exposed the full extent of Futoshi's horrific crimes. She testified that Futoshi would strip copper wires from electrical cords, divide them into 2 strands, and tie them to the hands, feet, face, and other body parts of his victims. He would then repeatedly plug and unplug the cords, causing excruciating pain. Prosecutors revealed that while Futoshi imprisoned the Ogata family, he exploited their fear of electrocution and fabricated lies to manipulate them into harming one another. He also created so-called standards, and anyone failing to meet these arbitrary expectations would be punished. This method proved alarmingly effective against Junko's family members, who desperately tried to please Futoshi. They betrayed, cursed, attacked, and even murdered their own relatives to avoid being shocked. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Futoshi denied all charges. With an arrogant demeanor, he told prosecutors and lawyers in court, "I didn't want to bully them. I was merely trying to establish the authority of a father figure and create order in our shared living environment. Electric shocks were just a method of discipline." On September 28, 2005, After 3 years of deliberation, the court delivered its final verdict. Both Futoshi and Junko were sentenced to death. Neither of them accepted the ruling, and they appealed the decision. 2 years later, in September 2007, the second trial was held at the Fukuoka High Court. This time, the court upheld Futoshi's death sentence. However, it determined that Junko had been coerced into committing crimes and had suffered severe abuse. Her sentence was reduced to life imprisonment. Futoshi once again appealed the ruling. 4 years later, on December 12, 2011, Japan's Supreme Court upheld Futoshi's death sentence, bringing the case to a close. Observers remarked that Futoshi often appeared mild-mannered, humble, and polite, but beneath his outward demeanor lay a cold-blooded heart. For Futoshi, the wait for execution was likely a harrowing experience, a torment mirroring the suffering he inflicted on his victims during their lives. Now it was his turn to face judgment and atone for his crimes. This marks the conclusion of today's video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Goodbye.